Good evening. Welcome to those of you who are joining us. I'm seeing the participant count tick its way up. And once we see that ticker sort of slow down, we will get started with the presentation, but we'll give it just another minute or so as folks are getting logged in and getting their audio connected. We're really happy and excited to be here with you tonight, and we'll start in just a moment. As you're getting settled in, just wanted to let everyone know that tonight's event, it is being recorded, and the recording will be shared with the entire senior parent population. Just in case you have any friends who weren't able to attend, we do understand that there was a conflict this evening with Oak Hill's open house. And I understand there are families that have children at both schools. We apologize for the inconvenience of the dual scheduling, but we're glad to be able to make this available on demand for those who can't view it live tonight. And it looks like we're slowly continuing to climb, but in the interest of starting on time and making sure that those of you who are here with us are not sitting and waiting for us to begin, we will get started. It's my pleasure to introduce myself, Dan Rubin, the Counseling Department Chair. We're joined tonight by our school counselors, and I'm going to make a couple of other introductions before we get started. And I will go no further than to introduce our principal, Tammy Strauss, and welcome her to her first senior parent night here at South. And I will turn it over.
Thank you, Dan. Hi, everyone. It's great to be here, and it's great to meet all of you. Tammy Strauss, principal at Newton South. As Dan said, this is my first year here, but I just wanted to be here to welcome everybody. We're so excited to have our seniors back. They have been incredible leaders this year. Our senior commons is beautifully decorated. They've been doing an incredible job, really, to lead the charge with all the other kids on board. And thank you to all of our counselors and for Dan for putting this entire thing together. And I would now like to hand it over to our vice principal, Jason Williams.
Hi, everybody. Jason Williams, vice principal here at Newton South High School. So this is also my first year as the vice principal at the school. I was previously at Braintree as a math teacher for 10 years. So definitely a interesting change of pace. In a good way. And I really hope that everybody's enjoying, your child's enjoying their senior year so far. It's great to be back in school in person and being able to actually see everybody again in the hallway. Has been at lunchtime and everywhere else has been amazing. It's been great. And, I hope that you folks enjoy this presentation. Thanks to everybody here who's helped put this together. And with that, I will pass it over to Michelle.
Hi, everybody. I'm Michelle Wetlaufer, the current PTSO president. I've just put some links in the chat for you. I'm sure, as you know, being parents of seniors, the goal of the PTSO is to build community, support teachers, communicate with each other, and raise funds to support activities. That's where we're coming in right now, is that I'd really love to reach our goal of $66,000. We have Southfest for the seniors only is $17,000 of our $66,000 budget. So if you could go onto that directory link, make sure your information is correct in the directory and donate to the dues, that would be really helpful, pushing us all the way there, so that we can have a great senior year for these kids who missed out on their junior year and so much great stuff. Also for the PTSO, we have a lot of volunteer opportunities. I know some of you have already come to me looking for what can we do for these seniors who did kind of miss a few things their junior year. So be sure on the right-hand side to volunteer at info@newtonsouthptso.org. Email me, let me know how you'd like to help, what your availability is, and we can get some committees together to really make this last year memorable and special for these kids. I think that was everything. The directory deadline is tomorrow, so please get on there, do that today. If you're not already signed up for the newsletter, you can go to newtonsouthptso.org to sign up for the newsletter. That's where you're going to get a lot of our weekly information. I also put a link for additional donations if you would like to do that. And if you have any questions, again, you can email me at info@newtonsouthptso.org. And now I'd like to introduce Star Liu, who is the Newton Public Schools Global Educator Developer, to speak about GELF, the Global Education Leadership Fund.
Thank you, Michelle. Hello, everyone. And I apologize if I take too much time presenting this. I have 2 slides for you. And I really appreciate the precious time you spare with me. And if this is more, you've listened to me more than one time, and please bear with me. I'll be quick. So let me quickly share my screen. So the GELF Fund, the whole name is called Global Education Leadership Fund. I'm not going to go into presentation mode so that my computer won't freeze. So our senior class this year, in sophomore year, some of us were able to take advantage of applying for a scholarship to on exchange trips in Newton North or Newton South, and we would like to keep the legacy going. And if you would like to know more information about global education program, if you have younger kids, this is where you could find it on the NPS website. And the GELF Fund scholarship link is right on the left. And in order to keep this legacy going, I'm asking our families to volunteer to be board members or volunteer at fundraising events, which I'm going to keep you updated. And if you are interested in mentoring a GELF scholarship recipient when we open up for international traveling, please also email me. And please help us connect with corporate donors if you can, and spread the word so we can provide a scholarship for more students to be able to have an international experience. So this is my email, lewy@Newton. Everything else is the same for Newton Public School email address. With that, thank you, everybody. I just want to wish everyone a very, very good and a good luck with the year, and a very fun year for all the seniors. So now I'm going to move it on to Dan, and he'll take over.
Great, thank you, Star. Just setting up my screen sharing here. All right, so this evening's event really is about the nuts and bolts of the post-secondary planning process. We are going to share with you some information that your students have been hearing in guidance seminars over the last couple of days in their win blocks. If your child has not yet had their guidance seminar this week, they very likely have it scheduled for tomorrow morning. And these are sessions that counselors will have the opportunity to meet directly with your children in small groups. We're also going to have opportunities for any students that could really benefit from having some repetition to get this information again in more measured doses. This is a dense presentation in terms of some of the procedures. We understand that while we spend a lot of time working with the process for planning for college applications or other post-secondary choices every single year with many students, for many of you, this might be your first time encountering this process. It might be your first time encountering this process with American colleges and universities. Perhaps members of your family have been educated in other countries. And it can be a little overwhelming. It can be a little bit confusing. We are here to guide you through that process every step of the way. You'll hear from several members of the counseling department tonight as we present this slideshow, and then we'll have an opportunity for questions and answers at the conclusion. I appreciate those of you who submitted questions ahead of time through the Google form that was shared. We have done our best to proactively address a lot of the common questions that came up, and we will have, as I said, an opportunity at the end to respond to any additional questions that come up. Before we jump into the slideshow, I just want to share, just some reflections and perspectives on what this time in your students' lives represents for them and also for you. So your students in the senior class are, they're growing into young men and women. As you look at them, though the bottom halves of their faces have been obscured for much of the last couple of years. When you do catch them in those unmasked moments, they might seem, unrecognizable from the kids that you remember watching on athletic fields or on the stage in prior years, in some cases dating all the way back to elementary school years. But though your kids are growing into young adults, what they need now from you are the same things they've always needed. They need your love, they need your support, they need to know that you're proud of them and that those feelings are unconditional, without contingency, no matter how things are going for them. This is a really exciting time for us as counselors. It's a huge responsibility to partner with you as parents and guardians to help launch your students into life beyond high school. It is immensely rewarding to see that growth. And it's satisfying to know that your students have developed the knowledge and skills that they need to be independent and self-advocating adults. Transitioning at any point, but particularly the transition from secondary education to post-secondary, either higher education or other options, it's a developmental process and students are in very different places. Some of your students may have a really clear vision of what they want, where they're headed, or at least where they hope to be headed. And others may have great uncertainty. At Newton South, I will just tell you that tonight's presentation is largely college focused. Part of that is that on an annual basis, we have approximately 85% of our graduates who go directly on to four-year colleges. Another 5% or so who go directly on to two-year schools, or in some cases, technical education. And that is a big focus, but we work individually with all students, regardless of what their plans are for their post-secondary lives. That may include prep school, it may include the military, it may include travel, it may include service work or directly entering into the workforce. Your counselor, your child's counselor, is a sounding board and a facilitator to help you and your children figure out what is realistic, what is appropriate, and how to get to where you are desiring to go. The focus tonight really is process oriented. So we're going to talk about things from an overview perspective, really the view from 30,000 feet, so to speak. And please know that this process becomes much more individualized for each student. And we are there, the counseling staff, to meet with you and your children individually and to guide you through this time. Again, there's a range of where students are at, and it's okay. And in fact, really, we encourage you to expect to see in your children some ebbs and flows throughout this fall as they feel some of the stressors and pressure points that are involved in navigating this complex time in their lives. There may be times that they're feeling in command of the situation, and other times that they're feeling overwhelmed and just need you to listen. Oftentimes, some of that can be related to just emotional ambivalence about some of the impending changes in their lives. I always like to point out that, when you're finishing every grade in sequence as you travel through your elementary and secondary journey, there is not a lot of decision-making involved. Some of your families may have made choices about considering private schools versus public schools. But when you finish the fourth grade, it's pretty traditional to move on to the fifth grade, and so on. When you finish 12th grade, things are very open-ended. And for your kids, that may be something that just feels confusing. And again, as parents and guardians, just to be there to listen and support and hear what your kids' concerns are is perhaps the most valuable support role that you can play for them. Teaching your kids how to own their vulnerability, how to learn to name and confront any of the insecurities that they might be feeling, is a part of the emotional maturation process. And naming those feelings and being able to process that information will help them, again, to be those independent, self-advocating young adults that they are destined to be as they move on to whatever comes next following South. Parenthood is kind of like any relationship in some ways. It's a very unique relationship in other ways, but all of our relationships as human beings involve a loop of connecting, disconnecting, and reconnecting with those around us. There are going to be bumps in the road. There are going to be times that you are feeling stressed out, your children are feeling stressed out. That's when we're here to listen to what's going on for you, to strategize, to problem solve, to talk things through. During those moments of reconnection, that's when the greatest growth in terms of thinking and maturity of thought, emotional maturity is going to take place. So really don't shy away from having those difficult conversations with your children, listening and helping to share with them some of the wisdom that you've picked up throughout your lives. None of us is necessarily sort of prepared to deal with all situations, but you are the expert in your children. You know how to read them. And sometimes just sitting down and being able to listen and have that conversation and hear what's going on for them is way more important than the tactical steps involved. So remember to solicit information from your kids about what their emotional experience is like as they're going through this time, and as best as possible to try to stay in neutral and make sure that your kids know that whatever it is that they're feeling is appropriate and okay for them to feel, and that the adults in their lives are there to help them through it. Deep breaths. We can help our kids to achieve balance in this process. Enjoy the little moments. This may be, for many of you, a stressful time as a parent, to think that this time next year, your child who you've raised and nurtured for all these years is likely going to be out on their own doing something less under your supervision than they have been. This year is a year to learn to build that trust, to with your kids, really develop your own sense of confidence that they are ready for what's ahead of them. We are so excited to work on this with you, and without further ado, we're going to jump into the presentation here. Tonight's agenda is going to include several topics, right? We're talking about planning for your future. That is the big picture, planning for your child's future. We'll spend some time talking about what are the roles and responsibilities of all the individuals involved here in school, you as a parent or guardian, and your child as the primary driver of this process. We're going to review some terminology to make sure that the vocabulary we use tonight feels familiar and comfortable. And if you have questions about that, we are here to answer. We'll spend some time talking about the different types of application formats for those of your children who are applying to college that they might encounter. And then just more broadly about, what are the components of a college application, and how will your children fill that out thoroughly and, with a great deal of reflection. We'll spend a little bit of time talking about college testing for those schools that are requiring testing. And even if your child is applying to test optional schools, if they've chosen to test, we'll talk a little bit about that. We'll circle back to something that we've spoken about before, which is Naviance, the software program that we use to help guide students through this process. You'll hear a little bit about college representative visits coming into Newton South, as well as college application instructions and procedures. There's a pretty exhaustive document that counselors have been reviewing with your children that you'll hear about tonight. And lastly, we'll spend some time talking about GPA, how that's being reported this year with some of the changes that were in place in our grading system last year. That was certainly an area where we saw a lot of questions from parents in advance of tonight's program, excuse me. So we're looking forward to all of that. You'll hear from all of us. So just right here, a couple of points, some of which I touched on a little bit in just that opening. But your child's journey and next steps after high school are going to be different from their best friend, maybe even from their siblings. Every one of our students is figuring out their own plan for their future based on their interests, based on their values, and we are here to support them in individualizing that process. No one path is better than any other. We don't attach value judgments to this. This is a time for self-discovery, self-reflection, not comparison. And we really emphasize to students, they are never behind in any step in this process. They are where they need to be, and we can help them figure out what are the next steps to move forward. But please, if at any point you're feeling that stress and you're wondering, is my son or daughter, is my child behind? Please give a call to your child's counselor. We can talk some of that through. As I mentioned, the presentation is largely college process focused tonight, but we work with students regardless of what their choices are and their vision is for their future. And that may include, as we said, a gap year or some kind of time off, entering into the workforce, career education, college, or possibly military service, and a number of other opportunities. It's important to keep in mind that this is a time in life that your children are recognizing and identifying their values and what's driving them and what their timeline is and what feels authentic to them. In some cases, their vision for themselves may diverge from the vision that you've had for them for the balance of their lives. And that can be a difficult time. It can be tricky to sort of process, how do I honor my child's vision for their own life? And that's, again, an area where as school counselors, we can support you if at any point you're sort of feeling your own stress level rise. And please just know we are so excited to work with you in this process, to guide you through this journey and to help launch your children. With that, I am going to turn it over on this next slide.
Thank you, Dan. This is Aaron Lewis. I'm a Wheeler House counselor. Hope you all can hear me. The next two slides are really very straightforward. They outline the various roles that the guidance team suggests to make this process go most smoothly. The four major players being the student, the counselor, the college and career counselor, and you, the caregiver. We see the student primarily being in the driver's seat for the process. The student is responsible for keeping track of applications, deadlines, requesting transcripts, communication with recommenders, and checking in with the counselor and the college counselor at school. Student is also responsible for sending any SAT or ACT scores to schools. As counselors, we will be assisting students with all of these tasks and helping them stay on top of everything. We'll help them with moral support and be meeting with all students on a regular basis throughout the fall. The role includes creating and refining college lists, reading essays, and assisting with the applications themselves. We also write a statement for every student that's going off to college. The college and career counselor, Kathy Sabat, who is wonderful, helps students with all post-secondary planning. Not all students are going to college right away or going to college at all, so she's helping kids with whatever path they choose. Kathy has a great deal of resources and help with financial aid, scholarships, and identifying the best disability service that might be needed. She maintains the college and career website and has a great deal of information for both families and counselors and students to use. And finally, you, the caregiver, your support is critical throughout this process, along with limit setting, both financial and geographical. Many caregivers attend college visits, whether they be virtual or in person, and we suggest some, but not too much support around essay review. I hope that was helpful to you, and on to Jim Medeiros with our next slides.
Hello, everybody. It's my pleasure to join you in the presentation, and I'll just take a moment to review the variety of admissions plans that are available to students. Just keep in mind that they differ from college to college, and also keep in mind that it's very important to be aware of the deadlines and requirements that each college has. And we suggest that you go to the college website to determine what those deadlines and requirements are. So the early decision is a binding contract. So it's often due before December 1st. So the applications deadline is usually tends to be before December 1st. And they can be as early as October 15th, though most are typically November 1st or as late as November 15th. Students may only apply to one early decision school. So it's important that when considering early decision, students should weigh the pros and cons, because it is a binding contract, which means that if students are accepted to their early decision school, they must attend. So it is a legal and binding contract. So students really need to be cautious and serious about considering early decision. Early decision 2 is similar to early decision 1, as it is also a binding contract, but deadlines are usually in January, typically January 1st or January 15th. Those are two common ED2 deadlines. And also, like early decision 1, students may only apply to one early decision 2 school. With early decision 2, because the deadlines are a little later in the calendar, this particular plan gives students a little more time to think about making such a serious commitment. But, remember, it is legally binding. So, and with both early decision 1 and early decision 2, before students make a decision to apply with this admission plan, they really should consider everything very carefully. If there are any concerns or questions, students should consult with us, their guidance counselor, or with Ms. Sabet in the College and Career Center. There are many factors involved in making the best decision for each individual student. So it's important that they make an informed choice with as much support as possible. Moving on to early action and restrictive early action and single choice early action. There's a lot there. This is an early submission. So the deadlines are early, often due in November and December, and it is non-binding. So unlike early decision, if students are accepted early action, it's not a binding contract. So really the advantage to these types of admissions plans is that students receive a decision, an admissions decision, typically around mid-December. Because deadlines are early, both of these plans, early decision and early action, so the plans that I've mentioned, they require students to do a lot of work between now and November 1st. And the college application process can be stressful. So it's important that students are emotionally ready so that they can actively engage in the application process and get all of their pieces ready and in place so that things are good to go by the time of their deadline. So especially if it's November 1st. There is regular decision. So the regular decision is pretty common, and application deadlines are usually around January through March. So students can apply to colleges as late as March 1st. So, and students receive a response in early spring. Some colleges also have rolling admission. So that means just that they don't have a set deadline for applications to be turned in. Students decide when to apply, and then college admissions will periodically review their applications that are submitted, and then make decisions throughout the calendar year. So it's, for students, it's maybe roughly a 6-week turnaround for that decision to be made. So those are the different admission programs for students. Moving on to the next slide. The common application. So the common application is something that many students are familiar with. It's a generic application recording student information that only needs to be filled out once. So what the nice thing about the common application is that over 900 colleges and universities, including some schools located outside of the United States, use the common application. A benefit to the Common App is that it helps streamline an essential part of the admissions process for students. And it allows students to apply to multiple colleges at once. Now, that's positive, but there's also a downside to that because it's very easy for students to keep adding more colleges, especially I find if they are anxious or nervous about their prospects. If anxiety gets a hold of them, students can sometimes keep clicking the box and applying to more and more colleges because it's so easy on the common application. So, I mean, I think it's important to impose an upper limit on how many applications are to be submitted because sometimes, like I said, that anxiety can drive students to apply to a far greater number of schools than they really need to. So, with that in mind, each student really should talk with us, their guidance counselors, and with Mrs. Sabet to determine what is the best and appropriate number for them. Naviance just is a program that we use here. It's a web-based platform that we use at South. And it's a college and career research and organizational tool for all students at Newton South. Many students may be already familiar with Naviance as a resource for college search, college researching, or career exploration. But for seniors, it takes on a whole new meaning because for those who are engaging in the college application process, it becomes very functional in terms of how we manage the transcripts, counselor statements, and teacher recommendations. All of that is managed through Naviance and gets all of this information to their final destination, the college admissions office. So it's an extremely helpful tool to help us manage all of the college admissions process for students at South. Just if students are having trouble with accessing or using Naviance, they should contact us, their guidance counselor, for assistance so we can get them connected because it is really important that they have good access to the program. And last, I'll just mention the test optional and test blind. These are schools that do not require the submission of standardized test scores, meaning the SAT or the ACT. Most schools are test optional for fall 2021 due to the pandemic. Just an explanation of the terms. Test blind, they're colleges that don't factor test scores into admissions decisions, even if students submit scores. And it's important to note that only a handful of schools are test blind. Just for example, there are 2 local schools in the area that are test blind, including Hampshire College and the University of New England. There is test optional, and that just means that students choose whether or not to submit the SAT scores or the ACT scores or any other test scores for consideration. If students are unsure or uncertain about whether they should submit test scores or not, they really should talk to us so that they can make a good informed decision about what to do, about whether they should release their scores to those schools or not. I mean, it's a good conversation for us to have if it's in any way a question mark for students. Happy to share this information with you this evening, and I will stop here and hand it over to my colleague, Ari Kenyon, so that she can continue with the presentation.
Hi, everyone. I'm Ari Kenyon. I am a counselor in both Cutler and Goodwin House. I'm going to talk a little bit about application formats and the core components of the application. There are 3 major application formats. The first one being the Common App, the most commonly used one, the term you probably hear the most. As Jim said, it's a generic online application that students use to apply to colleges. Each student will create their own account. This is where they add the colleges that they're applying to. And this is also where they're going to enter the majority of the information needed for their application. So including family background, personal information, activities, their resume, and their personal statement. And as we said before, the nice thing about the Common App is that once you enter in all of this major information, it doesn't need to be repeated for each school. It'll just get auto-populated to those schools. One thing to keep in mind is that some schools are still asking students to self-report their courses and grades. So in those cases, we encourage students to get a copy of their unofficial transcript first. So it just makes that process a lot more smooth. And if your student doesn't have a copy of their unofficial transcript or doesn't know where to go, they can go to their house secretary, their counselor, or even Miss Sabette to get a copy of their unofficial transcript. Lastly, the Common App is also the place where students will complete their supplements, meaning that some schools, in addition to the major information in their personal statement, will ask students to complete a few supplements. These are usually shorter and they have more focused prompts. The second major type of application is the coalition application. It's really just an alternate form of the Common App. One of the big differences is that the coalition app is a little bit newer and it serves a smaller group of schools, about 150 schools, versus the Common App, about 800 plus schools accept it. So that's why when given the choice, we encourage students to choose the Common App. And lastly, some colleges have their own applications. One school that comes to mind is Georgetown. So in those cases, students will complete their applications and submit those directly to the college through the college-specific application portal. And then moving on to application components. Thanks. So there's a lot of moving parts to the process itself, but with the student's whole application, we broke it down into 4 pieces that we really want students to focus on. So the first one being their application. So again, their common application, this is where they're putting in the majority of their information. The second thing that they want to be focused on is ordering their transcripts. So we don't know what school students are going to or where we need to send materials until we receive those transcript requests. So the way that process works this year is students will order them through My School Bucks. It's fairly straightforward. You'll log on to My School Bucks, you'll see the student transcript link, and then from there, students will input the colleges that they're going to with the deadlines. A transcript is $3 for each school. So there is a payment, and after you submit these transcript requests, then the student has done the work that they need to do. And on our end, we will then input those schools into their Naviance account, and then we know where to send the materials. The third thing that we want students to focus on is their teacher recommendations. We encourage all students to ask 2 teachers for recommendations. And we encourage students to secure permission from those teachers first. And once they have gotten the green light from their teachers, they can go ahead and formally request them on Naviance. And by doing this, it allows their teacher to send their recommendations to their colleges. And lastly, standardized test scores. As mentioned before, if students need to send test scores, they're going to send those directly from the College Board if they took the SAT, or the ACT site if they took the ACT. And lastly, as a counseling department, we send all supporting documents, including our counselor statement and school profile. So those are things that students don't have to ask for. We will just send those. And now I'm going to pass it off to Ms. Sabette, who's going to talk a little bit more about standardized testing.
Okay, hi everybody. I'm Ms. Sabette. I am the College and Career Counselor at Newton South. So to kind of pick up where Ari left off, standardized testing is different, has been different for the past couple of years in terms of recommendations by the colleges. So like last year for the class of 2021, the class of 2022, for the majority of colleges, the far and away majority of colleges, continue to offer a test optional way of either submitting or not submitting scores. And the best information on getting this is certainly to, go directly to the colleges, admissions websites for the most up-to-date information, just to validate. There's a lot of information out there about standardized testing, whether it be through, College Board or other, blogs, that type of thing. So it's really important to go to the source and go right to the colleges to find out exactly what their policy is on submitting standardized testing. So a little bit about standardized testing is there's two major testing organizations. The College Board product is called the SAT. And in this PowerPoint, you can get all the links to the information that's posted here. But you would go to College Board, create a College Board account if you haven't already. And then you would be able to register for SATs there. You'd be able to find your scores. You'd be able to send your scores to colleges as well, if that was something that you wanted to do. The other test that's often used for standardized testing is called the ACT. And there are some differences in terms of the way the test is formatted, and the way that it's timed, and kind of the scope of some of the subjects. So it is important to look at the two. And so the ACT has their own website. I think it's actstudent.org. Same thing, you would go there, create an account, register for any of the tests that are upcoming, do this, get your scores via that website, and then also send scores to colleges potentially. And again, like just a quick commentary about SAT versus ACT. Many students we'll try both tests, either take the PSAT, or they took the TSAT possibly in junior year. But you may also take a practice ACT at some of the test prep companies for free. That sometimes is a nice exercise earlier, like in junior year. But if students are thinking about, like, I'm not sure if I'm going to apply early, or I'm pretty sure I want to go to college, but I'm most likely going to apply to deadlines in January and beyond, then there's still time to kind of try, try practice SAT or try practice ACT. And if you need like ideas of where to do that, please come see me or your counselors. Other standardized testing that exists are advanced placement testing, which is usually conducted in school. Last year we had some in school, some online, and there's opportunities to self-report this on your common application. If you receive good scores, strong scores, anywhere from 3 to 5. Usually we recommend 4s and 5s to self-report those. You don't need to send formal scores for that, because you only have to send your formal scores to the college where you're attending. And that's for the purpose of possibly getting some extra credit and being able to be waived from taking courses potentially. That's a school by school call. So know that. And then fee waivers are available for both the SAT and ACT. And so if you're interested and qualified or want to know if you qualify, first, check in with your counselor. But then I can share that waiver with you. And I think that's it for me. I'm going to pass it off to our wonderful former interim vice principal, Mr. Hardiman.
Thank you, Kathy. Hi, everyone. I'm Chris Hardiman. I'm back to my role as a Golder counselor. I am happy to present a couple of slides here. Actually, I'm following up on the wonderful Mr. Medeiros, who did a stellar job covering some of this slide related to Naviance. So I won't repeat what he said to bore you. I will make a couple of additions, which are that for students that are still kind of at the beginning of the search and really trying to find out what schools might be a good fit in terms of interest, Naviance does have some great search engines. I mentioned to junior students last year to take a look at those, and there are 3 or 4 different search engines. So they really do a good job, I think, in helping students kind of pare down interest areas. The other thing I should mention is that college rep virtual visits, which I will get to in the next slide, that information is posted on Naviance. So we really want students to access their Naviance page. I know some of them maybe frequented their page more than others, but I really emphasized at my seminars that they really should start looking, because besides the information about teacher recommendations and when they were sent to schools, again, the virtual visit information is on Naviance, and it's updated frequently by Mrs. Sabet. Next slide, please. The college visits, unfortunately, we're hoping to have some of our visits in person. That was our plan, and we're just not there yet, unfortunately. So all of the visits will be virtual. They did start this week, and as I mentioned, they can be found in Naviance. And we have many, many visits coming virtually through September and October as colleges are added. Kathy Sabet adds them to Naviance. Teacher permission is required to attend. So if a student has a class, they do need to utilize the form. They will not be allowed to come to attend the event without the permission form. If a student has a free block, then of course they don't need the permission form. They can just come. But I did emphasize to students today, and it's important for your students if they have this question, that senior teachers are aware that these visits are very important for students to demonstrate interest in the school. And so even if a student has a test or quiz, for example, they are allowed to miss it and make it up the next day. Again, though, we don't want students to show up to the teacher's room 5 minutes before the test and say, oh, look, by the way, I can't come today. I have to attend the college visit. We want students to be responsible and contact the teacher, preferably 24 hours in advance at least. Attendance will be taken, as we mentioned, and so really, really important for students to be responsible and to come with the form. And we really want students to take advantage of the range of schools. We don't have just elite schools come to Newton South virtually. We have schools all over the map, competitive schools, schools that are, we have community college connections, that we have students that can attend those. And so colleges from far and wide across the country, especially now with the virtual format. In some ways, it's actually easier for college reps to come and present, and for students to ask good questions. And I think with that, it goes back to you, Kathy Sabet.
Okay, great. Thank you, Mr. Hardiman. So I just want to kind of just give you folks a visual of this document that Dan had mentioned, called the College Application Instruction and Procedure document. Can you go back to the slide? I just want to click the link so they can actually get a visual. Just click the word "this." There we go. So this document is available as a link on the College and Career Center webpage, which if you're not familiar with the webpage, that's available from the high school webpage. You just go to the tab Counseling and then College and Career Center. It'll take you to the College and Career Center webpage. And so as the counselors are meeting with their students in WIN sessions yesterday, today, and then tomorrow, they're getting this document. And I think it's about 5 pages, and it's been scaled down to be as direct and simplified as possible to kind of just walk students through, what do I need to do, to apply to colleges? What are my responsibilities on, for me to do that, and what is the school going to do? So I just want you to see kind of what it looks like without going through the entire piece, but I will kind of talk about some of the steps in my next slide. So we could go there. Awesome. So again, this is an outline because it is very specific in the document, so I would refer you to that. And I keep telling the students, like, just take it one page at a time, like just kind of do what's on page 1 and then go do what's on page 2. If you do those things, you know, you'll get everything done that you need to. And really at the end of the day, these are housekeeping tasks for the most part. You just kind of have to do some of them, and don't hesitate to ask questions. So for students, one of the first things you need to do for your counselor, and this is for them to prepare your statement, is to complete a senior information sheet. And the senior information sheet might vary between counselors because counselors, you know, like to highlight certain aspects and get certain information from students. And so, you know, to do that in a personal way, you know, they each might have slightly different questions. So if you're not sure where the senior information sheet is, I'm sure your counselor will be in touch with your student to let them know how they can get that. And many of them are online, so that can make it much easier to complete. In addition to that, there is a little bit of homework for parents and caregivers, and we ask you to complete a parent and caregiver information form. And that link is active in this document. So when you get the link, you can just, you know, go to that and complete that. So that's, again, also helpful for counselors to get your feedback, because who knows your students better than you, and really kind of share your insights about them so that they can be represented in the best, most positive and holistic way. Students are encouraged to schedule an individual appointment with their counselor. And that's really important, just to kind of, you know, touch base after, like, you know, maybe there hasn't been a chance to be together to talk about kind of post-secondary plans, or, you know, the student might be well on to the process of applying to college, and has a bunch of questions. So, you know, just kind of spending some time to kind of individualize this process for them is certainly a wonderful thing that we can offer. So a meeting with the counselors, I often join those meetings as well, which is nice because it's, you know, we're kind of, then we're all on the same page. So I'm happy to join in with those. Students will, as I believe Ari had mentioned, request transcripts through My School Bucks. And in this document that I'm referring to, you really want to, the students really want to pay attention to deadlines. And that's not just about college application deadlines, it's also about the deadlines that we at the school need students to follow so that we can fulfill the responsibilities we have. So this has to do with, you know, typically it's a 4-week deadline to request a transcript before the college deadline. So for example, in the document, you'll see for a November 1 deadline, students are going to want to request transcripts on My School Bucks by, I think it's like October 4th or something. It's about a 4-week lead time. And that's so that, you know, teachers, so counselors have enough time to write their recommendations. November 1 is by far and away our most popular deadline, with well over 60% of seniors that are applying to college having submitted an application. So we need that for that first initial deadline. We really need those 4 weeks. So really, you know, pay attention to those. Additionally, deadlines are needed for teachers. So we ask, like, again, the same deadlines that you would give to request transcripts, you know, request your teachers through Naviance 4 weeks prior to your college deadline. I think I just kind of mentioned that, number 5. You want to pay close attention to this section called the FERPA waiver, which is an acronym for the Federal Education Rights and Privacy Act. And that needs to be matched with Naviance. And basically what that is doing is colleges are asking students to waive their right to review a recommendation from a teacher or counselor in good faith, so that they feel like there is no undue influence being put on the writer. And this would be just waived for, it makes the colleges feel better that, the information is authentic and, without influence, as I said. And so there is kind of a matching process of doing that. And so kind of watching what that is, the details are in that document. And like I said, just follow it very carefully, and it's pretty seamless. That's a housekeeping task. Students should be aware that there are some colleges that will want the students to submit all of their grades and the courses that they took in high school right into the Common App. So that can take a little bit of time. And so as I believe Ari had mentioned as well, you want to get an unofficial transcript. I think it can be accessed. I'm very sure it can be accessed on Aspen. And you want to just transpose that information directly as it appears on the transcript. So if it says, junior English ACP, that's what the title is that you're going to put in to that section of the Common App. There's also another platform called self-reported academic records. This is kind of a newer phenomena. But again, like you'll need to have an unofficial transcript with you to complete that. And I can talk about that more like individually, but basically if a school has a request to do an SRAR, it would be after you submit the application. So the student would submit the application via the Common App to, we'll say University of Pittsburgh, because I know they're one of those schools. You send it to University of Pittsburgh. University of Pittsburgh sends you a confirmation email, and enclosed in that email is directions on how to complete their self-reported academic record. So continuing to check email is important for students. I know Mr. Hardiman was emphasizing that today in his session with his students. So, but just knowing that those kinds of extra little things can pop up is important. And finally, students do need to send SAT or ACT scores to colleges should they choose to send. And if they want consultation around that, certainly any of the counselors or myself are willing to do that and happy to. So next slide, please. Okay, so there is a section in this document that is gonna, this is far and away the questions that I get every year, really early on before we have our senior seminars. And so just know that it's right there for you to just basically, again, transpose and copy into your Common App. So it is under the education section, under the section grades. And it's asking you for the date of entry, and that's going to be whenever you entered Newton South. So if you came in and you've been there for 4 years, it's going to be 9/2018. If you came in after that time, it's going to be the month and date year after that. Graduation is June 9th, 2020. Who's counting? Right now, the graduating class size is 481. And so on. As you can see, class rank reporting, we don't report that. We're not reporting a GPA scale at this time, and we want students to leave the cumulative GPA and the GPA weighting blank. And Dan will go into that a little bit more in a couple slides. And next slide. And now he's going to do that, I guess.
We're actually jumping, right into GPA here. And I just want to acknowledge that far and away, the most frequent questions that we have been receiving and in communication with our counterparts over at Newton North, we know they're getting a lot of the same questions. Just regarding GPA, there are certainly those of you who have had older children come through the Newton system may recognize that there are some changes that have taken place. Much of this was in response to some of the changes in grading practices at the two high schools during the 2020 and 2021 school year. We, in response to some of the changing circumstances based on the pandemic, we were forced to reconsider how we were computing GPA. So historically, we have used one singular GPA scale, and we've been able to provide both a weighted and unweighted GPA, as well as cumulative GPAs representing 10th grade and 11th grade once students finish the 11th grade. And in the senior year, traditionally, we have done a cumulative GPA that includes the semester grades from senior year and then subsequently the final grades from senior year. Because we were on a different grading scale during the 2020-2021 school year, it really complicated our ability to calculate a cumulative GPA. Additionally, there were some other changes, recommendations that were made by a GPA committee that had representation from the Ed Center, Newton North, and Newton South that worked throughout the year last summer of 2020 and into the 2020-2021 school year. That committee did a great deal of work to survey admissions representatives from strategically, we reached out to the intersection of the top 100 schools that students from Newton North and Newton South applied to just based on number of applications. And in the end, we reached out to representatives from 110 schools. We got responses from 85 of those schools. And based on those responses, we made recommendations to some practice changes that we were going to do to adapt to the changing circumstances in terms of grading, as well as the feedback that we were receiving from college admissions representatives. So this was shared with the school communities in January of 2021. I just want to highlight 4 key bullet points that represented some of the areas where there were changes in practice. So we, for the 2020-2021 school year, used a modified grading scale, and there was a modified GPA scale that worked in correspondence with the modified grading scale. Now that we have returned to a more traditional grading scale for this school year, what we're seeing is that students' grades are represented by one set of grading practices from 9th and 10th grade, a different set for their 11th grade year, and a return to a system that is very closely aligned with our practices from 9th and 10th grade for their senior year. As a result, again, we were not able to do a cumulative GPA that factored all of those years of academic performance into one number. And where that left us is making a decision to report students' grade point average year by year. And on the next slide, you'll see a visual representation of what that looks like in real terms. We made a decision or a recommendation that was accepted that beginning with the class of 2024, so this does not affect your children in the class of 2022, that we will in fact be reporting 9th grade grades in the grade point average. This was an area that we got frequent feedback from students and families and from colleges that it was a bit misleading that the 2 Newton schools traditional practice has been to not include 9th grade grades in the computation of grade point average. Because those grades are on the transcript, and for those colleges that do recalculate GPA, they do consider grades earned in grade 9 as well as 10, 11, and 12. The last piece here was a recommendation that came regarding weighted GPA, and the calculation of weighted GPA was eliminated last year. There were several reasons for that. The primary reason, the largest reason, was related to equity and the idea that we as a school and a school system, we differentiate our levels. We encourage all students to be appropriately challenged with the right level of curriculum and the right rigor. And we value student achievement. We don't value student achievement at different levels in different ways. And there was really kind of some mixed messaging that was being sent by valuing, literally in terms of point value, achievement at one level higher than achievement at another level. When all students are taking their courses at an appropriate level of challenge, the decision that both schools arrived at was that from an equity standpoint, it simply did not make sense and was deleterious to the student experience for students to be rewarded and literally, again, that valuing grades earned in some classes more than grades earned in other classes. So that was a big part of that decision. That was not the sole factor behind that decision. There were some other pieces that went into that conversation. So I mentioned we have a sample transcript here. I recognize things are very small here. It may be difficult to make it out, but you'll notice that on all student transcripts, we have a listing of those courses that students take with the level designation. So there is recognition of the levels that students are taking their classes on. They appear with the course titles on transcripts. Those colleges, institutions of higher education that are in the interest of weighting GPA, when they recalculate GPA, they may choose to weight GPA based on the level that students are in. So that is represented here on transcripts along with the final grades and credits earned. On the right-hand column, though I understand you may not be able to read this clearly, you'll see there's a section where grade point average is reported. We indicate that GPA is calculated each year based on courses and grades for the year, and that we do not calculate a cumulative GPA. And then you'll see we are still reporting because there is a legacy weighted GPA that exists from your students' 10th grade year. For 10th grade, we report both their weighted GPA that was earned during that year, as well as the unweighted version of that 10th grade GPA. We report their 11th grade GPA, and when mid-year transcripts are released to colleges, there will be an additional line on here showing the in-progress GPA for the senior year. We also have some information here about our grading scale, as well as the grading scale used in prior years. And there is more extensive language about what learning has looked like at Newton South throughout the COVID-19 pandemic that appears on our school profile document, along with a more exhaustive description of our grading system, as well as a detailed explanation of our grade point average practices. That school profile document goes out with every single transcript and application that we send. It is used by colleges and universities to provide some additional context so that colleges and universities understand the experiences of our students within the context of their school and their graduating class. So the language specifically to GPA that is included on the school profile is copied here on this slide. But it makes clear that our GPA calculation includes grades from grades earned in the grades 10 through 12. Grades earned in 9th grade or outside of Newton Public Schools are not included. We explain the elimination of the calculation of weighted GPA, that in order to accommodate multiple grading scales, we are no longer reporting a cumulative GPA, as well as information about what is represented on transcripts for students in the class of 2022. So I know there's a lot of sort of dense information there. Some of it is about the logistics of what is being reported and how, on a prior slide, Kathy referenced how we are coaching students to respond to Common App questions. I will tell you that we understand it may be a little bit misleading that students are reporting on the Common App that Newton South does not have a GPA weighting scale. The reason that we are encouraging students to answer none on that question when it asks what is the scale is that when a student says a response to that, the Common App requires them to enter a cumulative GPA, which again, we do not have a cumulative GPA calculated. So GPA is reported to colleges. We are very clear with colleges about how it is reported and what it represents. But in terms of the mechanics of how students are allowed to represent that on the Common Application, there are some limitations. So there's a very specific way that students need to respond to that question. I realize there may still be some questions about that because it is, again, nuanced and just a lot of dense information there. but we're happy to respond to any additional questions you might have, whether you choose to submit those through the Q&A function, or if that's something you'd like to follow up with your child's counselor or with Kathy or I. We're happy to answer any questions that you might have. So that was a mouthful. From there, just some closing thoughts to keep in mind. Very important to remember deadlines. Kathy touched on this earlier, as did a couple of our other presenters. Critically important, that transcript request is in many ways what triggers the cascade of counselors knowing that there's an upcoming deadline, and that they need to prioritize in their queue of letters that they're preparing your child's letter of recommendation. For subsequent applications after the first transcript or application that gets released, it is less critical to have that full 4-week advance notice. Although, as you might imagine, in a school our size with nearly 500 graduates in the class of 2022, and students in some cases applying to 8 to 12 colleges, the workflow for the office staff who are doing some of the behind the scenes clerical work, it's quite extensive. So we do ask that you, to the best of your ability, honor and respect those transcript request deadlines. Certainly, you can feel free to follow up, and this is for your children, follow up with teachers writing on their behalf if they haven't already. And this last piece here, if they're adding schools to their list, be sure to let their teachers know so that those letters of recommendation are submitted. Keep in mind, many colleges do vary in their requirements. It's important to check each individual school's admissions website for details. Again, I know this came up, but one of my great frustrations in this process is that even within specific schools, sometimes their admissions application deadline and their financial aid deadline are not one and the same. So particularly if you are applying for financial aid, be sure to be mindful of any priority financial aid deadlines as well as those application deadlines. Follow that document that was shared in the chat that Kathy talked us through around the college application instructions and procedures. Really, it does break down the process step by step, and the goal and really the outcome that we've seen for students in prior years and in our work so far this year is that it really does facilitate a logical sequential process for your children. And lastly, just remember to reach out to your child's counselor or Ms. Sabat if there are any questions that you have. If you need to schedule a meeting, just to check in and make sure that everything is on track. You can always ask questions via email, or your child can log on to Schoology and send a message that way. But please communicate. And at this point, that concludes the formal presentation, and we are ready to field some additional questions. There have been questions coming into the chat throughout that have been responded to in writing, but please feel free to submit additional questions now, and we will field some of those. Ms. Battler, I know that you were going to help sort of moderate some of the questions.
I'm sorry, I've been trying to answer the ones on the Q&A.
Absolutely.
So one of the first questions is, if a student takes Friday off to go spend a weekend at a college, will that absence be excused? And I'm happy to take that one if you'd like.
Sure.
As long as a parent calls the house office and excuses the absence, it will be excused. However, please keep track of how many absences, and your child should talk to the teachers before they leave so that they can be current with the homework. The next question, how do students who are currently on 504 plans get accommodations in college? Do you want to take that one, or would you like me to?
I can take it if you want.
Feel free to jump in, yeah.
So accommodations in college are going to require documentation for that. So you want to be sure that any testing that was done is within, ideally 3 years. of you entering into college. And so you would want to make an appointment with the academic support or disability services. They're all housed in a variety of different titles depending on the school. And you would make an appointment, bring that documentation with you. And at that point, the college will determine what is an appropriate accommodation for a college student. So it could look different than what a student is currently receiving in high school. And it does require that the student be able to own the advocacy of this process a little bit more in reaching out to professors and that sort of thing. And I'm sure like there's a bit of coaching that goes with that from the office, because this might be kind of new for students who have never had to do that before. But so there are some differences. But if you have current testing, which is within a 3-year time period, you take your testing with you, and then they will draw up things that are reasonable and appropriate at the college level. I don't know if anybody else has anything else they want to add.
I think you did a good job, so I'm going to move on to the next question since we have so many. There are a lot of different questions about financial aid, and I know that we usually run a financial aid evening. Can you mention to everybody when that is?
So we're not doing, usually we have a in-person program where a current financial aid director would come and present, soup to nuts about financial aid, representing this organization called MIFA, which is the Massachusetts Educational Financing Authority. In lieu of that, there are online webinars through MIFA, MEFA.org. I don't know if, hey, you could put that in the chat, a link to that. And those are really, really offered like flexible times, dates, and it really still covers, the presentation covers all the same material that would be handled in person, but certainly much more convenient and available at different times. So we're going to do that this year. And so I hope people will take advantage of that. And of course, follow-up questions with counselors or myself.
Great. The same question is asked a number of different ways. Can you tell us about curveballs? What's a common mistake?
Excuse me, Sue. I just wanted to mention really quickly regarding financial aid and expenses and fees, that for students who are on free or reduced lunch, a lot of the fees are waived. Also, if families think they may be eligible for free or reduced lunch, for them to apply for free or reduced lunch, the transcript fees are waived, application fees often are waived. So there are a lot of fees that are waived through this college application process. In addition, if there's a financial crisis that the family is having or had recently that may impact their ability to kind of go through this college application process without burden, you can also talk to your guidance counselor about that as well, and we will work with you. So I just wanted to mention that.
Thank you, Mr. Allen. That's really good information. So I'm going to go back to a common mistake or a curveball. I think from my years of experience, I would say that students don't check their email, the email that they apply to colleges with, frequently enough. Often colleges will send an email as soon as a student has applied with a link to a portal. And in that portal, they will mention things that are missing, like test scores, teacher recommendations. Last year, we even saw some colleges through that portal send an extra essay question or supplemental question. So please and they'll send information about merit scholarships, which are not need-based. So please tell your students to check their emails daily.
I can mention some other mistakes. I'm Kara Veely. I'm a counselor in Goodwin House. So one mistake is not proofreading. So kids need to proofread not only their essays, but the application. You know, it's not, a lot of it's not rocket science, name, parent's name, you know, address, but they want to present themselves professionally. So they should read it over. They should ask you to read it over or ask us to read it over. And another mistake that I see, not tons of kids, but a few kids make every year, is applying to too many schools. And because they apply to so many schools, they make mistakes. It's too many balls to juggle. And they don't express clearly enough to the schools they apply to that they are seriously interested in them. And schools, you know, they value yield. They want the people they accept to accept them. So it's really important, you know, quality over quantity. You want to proofread, you want to, they want to proofread, they want to ask other people to proofread for them. They want to attend the information sessions of the schools. They want to spend time on the supplemental essay saying, why do I want to go to XYZ school, with some good information from the website. So applying to too many schools doesn't allow you to do that well. So, all right.
I might do one more. Just one thing is I would highly encourage students to limit the number of people that read their personal statement essay. And this is because the more people that look at it, the more opinions the student's going to get, and the more confused they might become, and the less it sounds like them. So I would really encourage you to kind of, you know, be selective who you share it with and who you want to have review it. And always remember that, you know, even with the comments that you do get from the limited number, at the end of the day, this is your essay. And if it doesn't sound like you, then you need to just take it back, and you need to just sit with it.
Okay, I'm looking at the clock, so I will end with the question about what is demonstrated interest. And if you can imagine that all of the applications are Common App, they all come in looking the same form, same questions. Demonstrated interest is when the student shows a college that they really are interested. They let the college know that that's a school that they want to go to. And they can do that by attending the virtual sessions Ms. Sabet has set up. They can go to college fairs. If they get an invitation to a coffee and dessert at the Marriott or a nearby hospital, they should also attend. Anything they can do to show the college, I'm not just hitting the send button. I really want to go to your campus. Another way not to do that is to just drive through a campus and look at it. If you're going to visit a school, make sure that you check in with the admissions office. And with that, Mr. Rubin, I'm going to turn it back to you to wrap things up.
Thank you, Ms. Battler. So, you know, I know there are very likely questions that we were not able to get to. Again, please feel free to reach out to your child's counselor, to Kathy Sabet, or to me if there are any questions that you have that we were not able to address this evening. You know, I am so appreciative for you as an audience, and you know, again, this is a partnership. This is you know, really, you know, a two-way street where we are sharing the same goal of helping your children to achieve the greatest success that they can, and to feel confident and comfortable with their future plans. So at any point in time, if questions come up, don't hesitate to reach out. You know, again, if stress levels are rising in your household and you just need to process, to vent, to reflect a little bit, by all means, that is what we are here for as your allies, and guides for you and your students. So please take full advantage of that opportunity. We so look forward to spending time together. And then when we're seeing one another on the field for graduation, really celebrating the successes that your children have achieved, not just this year, but throughout their Newton South experiences. So thank you very much. I wish you a great night, and don't hesitate to reach out with any additional questions. Thanks so much.
Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Dan. Good night, everybody. Thank you for being here.